Welcome to Sorghum Smart Talk. I'm John Duff, NSP Strategic Business Director, coming to you from Lubbock, Texas. We're joined today by Shayne Suppes. Shayne is a new Sorghum Checkoff board member and was a member of Leadership Sorghum Class 1 and one of the many folks from the Leadership Sorghum class that is now doing great things in the sorghum industry. Shayne, thanks for joining us this morning.
Yes, sir, John. Thanks for having me.
Well,
It's a pleasure.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you. Are you back in the field finally? I know that this was such a crazy year, moisture, and are you finally back in the field and finally harvesting a pretty good crop?
Yes, sir. We finished with our little dab of corn, and we actually dove into some food grade sorghum yesterday. So we fired up.
So how's it cutting so far? Any ideas, good, bad, ugly, about what you expected?
Well, I'll tell you right now, we're running on some white sorghum. It's 58.5 pounds, 14 moisture, and making around 115 an acre, 120 bushel an acre. So I'll be pleasantly pleased with everything if it keeps up.
Oh wow, that is pretty good. I'm guessing that's as a result of that summer moisture you got. Northwest Kansas was crazy this year. Were you right in the middle of that wet summer craziness, or were you kind of on the edge of it?
I'll tell you what, I feel like I was right in the middle of it. Our average rainfall here is about 16 inches per year, 17, and I'm sitting currently about everywhere on my farm at about 22 to 23 inches. So, yes, our ground is wet. There's no doubt about it. That'll be the biggest issue with harvest this year is trying not to get a combine stuck. I mean, the grain seems to be dry, and we had a hard freeze for 2 nights in a row about 2 weeks ago. So all we have to watch out for is muddy patches and rutty roads. So
with all that moisture, how's the wheat planting going? You have all the wheat in the ground. I'm guessing it's probably
I'll
up to a
tell
great
you
start.
what, I'm very happy to say our wheat is all in the ground, and the first stuff we put in is a couple inches tall. So I'm feeling great about the wheat crop.
Awesome. So give the listeners a little bit of context about where we're talking about exactly. Where are you from?
I am from Scott City, Kansas. So if you're looking at a map of Kansas, on the left-hand side, halfway from the top to bottom in the third county in, we're right north of Garden City. We're right northwest of Dodge City, which usually everyone's familiar with those two. So we're way out here on the western side. So it's a beautiful treeless country.
And so you are wheat, little bit of corn, sorghum, and a fallow rotation. Is that a fair assumption?
Yes.
I know a lot of guys aren't fallowing
Yes.
really in your area anymore.
All non-irrigated. Yes, sir. 3, summer fallow, wheat, and milo usually. We usually don't have corn bins. It's usually too dry. But yeah, it works out well here. What we do, we'll run a stripper head also, which makes a great cover and seed bed for the sorghum coming up. We'll plant our sorghum right in the wheat stubble. And yeah, that's our rotation. And it seems to work out great. That wheat, it's great about keeping other weeds out. If you get a good wheat stand, the way I feel about it, you're going to have a good milo or sorghum stand following that if you keep your weeds controlled. So it seems to be working for us. We run about 12,000 acres, so we usually try to keep those all in thirds. We will have carryover or continuous acres. We usually are heavy on sorghum. That's our number one crop. We can have upwards of 5,000 acres a year of sorghum. So about 65% of that is food grade or specialty.
Well, that's awesome. That makes you one of the largest sorghum farmers in the U.S. That's pretty cool that we've got you here visiting with us. So, any cattle? Remind me.
No, sir. No cattle.
Okay, I didn't think so. So, back up before you came back to the farm. I know you spent some time off of the farm. Talk a little bit about that experience and what you did before you came back.
Absolutely. It was probably the best thing I ever did. As far as it made me re-energize my love of the farm, which when you grow up on a farm, from the time I could walk, I'm from the family farm. It's been in my family forever, so I didn't think twice about it. So back in 2003, I've always been a Harley guy and a Harley enthusiast. So in '03, I ran away from the farm. I thought, you know what? It's got to be better out there. I went to Harley Davidson school in Phoenix. I've worked on the West Coast. I've worked in the Rockies out in Colorado. I've worked in Kansas City. And that made me realize how much I loved farming and having the freedom and producing food. So I call it running away, for 7 years. And then I called my dad and said, hey, if you want me to come back, I'm ready. So in 2010, I came back. And that's really when I started doing leadership stuff in, whether it be with the wheat industry or sorghum. My dad's always been heavily involved in U.S. Wheat Associates and the wheat side. So I thought it'd be neat to focus on sorghum, and I love it. And I love food sorghum. So that's a short story.
That's awesome experience. It's always cool to hear folks talking about the perspective they got, and really, you were out in the world with the folks that are consuming your products. So what better way to understand kind of how the other person in this equation thinks than being out there with them. So that's really neat experience. Thanks for that. So 2010, you came back, and 2011 or early 12 was when the leadership class started. So tell us about that experience and what that did for you as far as preparing you for now and opening your eyes to some new things.
Absolutely. I am a huge advocate for leadership sorghum. Uh, you can spend your entire life like I did. My grandfather started growing sorghum out here in the 60s, which, to all of the regular, and myself included, folks, we always just looked at it as an alternative crop. It's itchy. Okay, we're going to grow some birdseed. What's neat is you go through a 15-month program, and you learn in 15 months more than I've ever known, about the crop, about the uses, about all the things you can do with it. And I became fascinated. It opened my eyes to all new things, all new ways, like going to the baker, the AIB in Manhattan, and learning, because I love food, and being able to cook for people. And I do have a little bit of a gluten sensitivity, so it's very, very encouraging for people, who can't have gluten and still want to enjoy. So it's fascinating to me. And you're back to the people, seeing people all over the globe, or like where I was at in California, for instance. It does not matter what your political affiliation, what you do for a living, we're all connected with food. So what's neat is you could disagree about everything under the sun, but you're going to agree about food. So that's where my focus is. I'm fascinated with food grade sorghum and alternative uses in the market, because I feel like, if we didn't have food, what else is there? So that's my goal, is to promote and try to enhance the food side of the sorghum.
So did you? So how long have y'all been doing food grade stuff? Is that something that you started, or is that something that's been kind of long on the farm?
Well, I'll tell you what, it was leadership sorghum that started that, because I grow out here, some for Earl at New Life Market, and we've lived out here close to each other all these years, but had no idea about one another.
Wow.
And, so I met and talked with Earl. I believe we were in Washington on our Washington trip, and we sat down and started talking. And I have a lot of, I can store, around a 250,000 bushel. Yeah, probably close to 250. And that was a real big part of it, because out here, that's our struggle, is logistics and storage. No one around me stores sorghum. So, and we hadn't either until we hooked up with Earl. So yeah, it was Leadership Sorghum that started my food grade production back in 2012 or 13. Yep. So Leadership Sorghum has opened a market for me that was very unexpected. It's been very good. And our acres, we started off about 20% food grade. And no kidding, in just this short amount of time, I've taken those acres up to over half. So I'm very pleased, and I give all that credit to NSP and the Checkoff, and I'm happy to work for the Checkoff and represent it because look at the things it's doing for me.
Oh, what an awesome testimony there. You said you're somewhere right around 65% then this
Yes.
year, and you said food or other specialty uses, and earlier you kind of alluded to birdseed. Are there a whole lot of kind of out of the box markets there, kind of wrapped up in some of the food stuff, or are those
Yeah,
just kind of human use?
I'll tell you it. I believe, and we've sent white pearly sorghum to the San Diego Zoo for the exotic birds to eat. Um, we've done stuff. We sent it for Heineken beer. So there's all kinds of things. There's aquaculture. There's all kinds of things outside the regular quote unquote bird seed, which I had no idea that the birds in the zoo needed a high class feed, but they're high class. So I mean, high grade. So no, I'm always open to growing new things and trying new things. And another one is Waxy, which it hasn't really picked up yet, but we're in the best area in the nation to grow waxy sorghum. So once it picks up and rolls, that's my main specialty besides the white pearly food grade.
Okay, so elaborate a little bit on Waxy. What is Waxy and what is it used for, and why is that going to be a good thing in the future, you think, for you and for the industry overall?
Well, all the aspects. It's I call it super sorghum. It's got a high, the starch content in it. So actually, if you were to use Waxy and replace everywhere that you use regular sorghum, in theory, well, it's been tested, but it will do better, produce more, make more ethanol, anything. That waxy sorghum, that's what they're after is that starch content, and it seems to be the way to go. We're trying, and it's like anything. You don't want to put the horse before the cart, that type of deal. But I believe that everything that's going on with our international markets will help us focus on our domestic market and uses for things like waxy sorghum. So, yeah, there's all kinds of things I say, like we always hear, in the pipeline. I do have waxy in my bin, you know, from the year before last. So back to the horse before the cart when it comes time, and I've sent loads out for testing and things like that. So and when the time comes, I think that market's really going to open up too. So I just have to maintain my positive attitude about holding grain sorghum for more than a year. So,
So it sounds like storage is a significant part of your operation. Then is kind of an understatement there. You said you're
oh
about
yeah,
a
I
quarter
need more.
a quarter million. Do you store any commercial sorghum, or are your bins
No,
dedicated specifically to specialty and food?
just for me, just for us. I think in the future, um, I just believe out here there may have to be a gathering point or a collection point, like you're talking for sorghum only. Because out here, like I said, no one stores it. The co-ops, they all just throw it on the ground. So if people want to make and have and be in a better market, they're gonna have to do on-farm storage. That's the only way you can have any power over the market. And by the way, $3 a bushel for sorghum is not going to cut it. That just doesn't. So something has to change. Markets have to develop. We have to get up on our feet, as an industry. And I think I think we're going to get there. We get through this little hiccup road bump thing, and we're really going to get going. And even during these hard times with China, for instance, we are going to be better for this. The industry is going to be stronger when we come out. I have to believe that because I don't think we can go any lower.
Well, that's an awesome positive outlook. I think I think sometimes in ag we're so dependent on the sky for rain. I feel like we get wrapped up in the weather being the only thing that's uncontrollable, and we can kind of throw our hands up with that, uh, and sometimes it comes down to the markets the same way. You just have to know that long term the folks need the product, and so you've just got to believe that like the weather's going to straighten itself out, so will the markets.
Yes, absolutely. And back to the weather, it wasn't very many years ago, and I'm talking within 5 years ago, we were we were working with 5 to 7 inches of precip for a couple years. So, I mean, if you can work with that, and we do a lot of no-till, that's our main thing until the grass starts to take over, and then you have to sweep, your edges or whatever. But yes, I have to maintain a positive attitude because it seems like in agriculture we're so easy to get distraught, and we're so easy to be, you know, where we want to complain or wish it was better. Well, what we have to do is maintain that attitude and work together. Like I was saying, if we're going to do any kind of collection point or loading unit trains or any of that, we have to come together as a team. It's such a small industry. If we don't stick together, we won't get any progress. So I feel like being on the board. I really feel like that's a good place for me because I want a voice for other sorghum farmers out here that are kind of frustrated. I look around at some neighbor farmers. They are awesome sorghum farmers, but their skills, I don't want to say are being wasted, but they're not being exploited to their max because they're just they're hauling that stuff to the co-op and just giving in to the man. So I don't want to be anti-co-op, but in these specialty markets, you have to basically take the middleman out and try to find direct markets, which is tough. It takes a lot of legwork. That's why people don't do it.
Have you done much on the export side, or is that all pretty much domestic at this point?
Right before the tariff, I had a deal to ship out. Oh, I think we were going to ship out to start with about 25 or 30,000 bushel of Waxy for Baijiu. And then the tariff hit and it canceled it all. So if I'd have been aggressive by 1 week, my grain might have been the grain that was out there in wonderment, floating around, not knowing where it was going. And so I'm actually glad that it didn't happen that way because I still have the grain, and that way I didn't have to go through all of that just to have it backfire.
And so your grain still remains in storage right now,
Yes,
a couple of
yes,
years later.
yeah.
So,
But you have to be a risk taker, and if I go to a meeting or if I go out somewhere and try to promote specialties or promote not really waxing, really, because that's more extreme in the specialties to me, but just to get somebody to think outside the box, like my father was, he's old school, so it was hard to get him to look into specialties. You know how hard it is to get a farmer out of his regular routine? It's difficult. So once we got there, now I can go comfortably to somebody and say, hey, or say, hey, John, man, you need to see what this can do for you, maybe. Well, how can I promote that if I haven't tried it or had the courage to jump into it? So same goes if you're going to be a representative of sorghum. The pessimistic attitude and I sure hope we can make it. No, no, we have to remain united and positive. So I feel good about what's coming. I have to.
Well, that is awesome perspective this morning, and this year has just been so challenging. I feel like this is probably one of the most challenging years we've had in 3 or 4 decades in American ag, and so that's great perspective, and
Absolutely.
that's great things to be positive about. Kind of broaden that out and talk a little more about the way you feel like agriculture is going in the next 10 to 20 years in America. Where are we headed? Are you pretty bullish? I can probably guess that one.
Yeah, yeah. Um, I think within the next 10 years, we're going to see more domestic use for this product. And like I said, I think the situation that's going on around the world is going to help us focus on the things like the places that say certain board members will visit, or these up and coming products. They're really, really fascinating. And I think once people realize what you can do with stuff that we have right here, I feel like we're just going to go leaps and bounds. This crop is so versatile, and like for me out here, I can't imagine. And I know people are like, I'm not planting any sorghum this year because of a sugarcane aphid. Well, ain't no little bug gonna slow me down. My routine and my rotation, I will not be bullied by a pest or drought or any of that. Sorghum will always be planted on my farm because I feel like if I didn't have it, I'd just be missing out on an opportunity. And we grow such good sorghum. I mean, as a whole, and a lot of it is we have silt loam soil. It's great for when you get droughty. It's able to hold water. So out here, I feel like we're given the perfect land for the crop. So that being said, now it's time to dig in and work on getting a market. Look what ethanol did. Look what ethanol did for taking large amounts of grain and making it disappear. So that was one facet of the industry. Now we need to come along with our other ones. And just like the China deal, yeah, we focused on that for several years here, and they took the whole crop. Well, then we're not looking around at other opportunities. We're just staying blinders on forward to that. Well, this is going to help us realize that we have other places to use this stuff, and we're going to have to start getting into that. And
Well,
I think food is a big deal. It's a big part of it. What was I reading on my growing appetite for sorghum? It says sorghum's presence, for instance, on restaurant menus has increased by 256%. So that was on my commodity classic notes from last year. So even though it looks grim, I believe that we're still growing. Look at the success over the 10 years of the checkoff. It's been highly successful, and I don't see any reason why it can't continue that. So,
absolutely. So that's great to hear actual words from the country coming out and approving and supporting that viewpoint that the checkoff's making a difference, and really it comes down to you, right? I mean, staff only can do so much if it's not for farmer leadership, and so your leadership and your fellow farmers leadership is absolutely key. You still do have some commercial sorghum. Talk about those markets and where you see that headed, and kind of how you market your commercial sorghum and where you think you might market it in the future.
okay, out here, it's usually going to go to Wind River. Most everybody, at least around here, they know that's a terminal, but down in Garden City, and all these local country elevators, they basically all funnel that commercial stuff to Wind River, and then it's unit trained out. So I feel like in the next 10 years in that market, and what I hear is there's going to be containers, not only for say beef hides and the new dairy setup that's in Garden, but there's going to be containers that are going to come in and out of Garden City, which that's going to help the commercial side of sorghum as much as anything. If we're able to contain that stuff, what I think needs to happen, and this isn't the commercial side, but the IP stuff. that's interesting too. That's what I think of when I think of containers. But I think that in the next 10 years, there's going to be other markets besides funneling all this to a unit train to Mexico or whatever. So I'm not sure because right now, like I said, all around Scott City, what they've done, like the Scott Co-op there, they took the sorghum out of the elevator from last year and they put it on a pile. So to me, right there, that takes that value down because it's such a small industry. But you come to Western Kansas during harvest, you're going to see piles of sorghum everywhere, and you'll think, oh well, wow, look at all that. There's money to be had out here. No, there's a reason it's sitting there. It's because you have one entity marketing that grain, to one place. So I feel like that's got to change. There's got to be different buyers, different exposure for the crop. And I feel like what we're doing here, we're gonna enhance that value. It's going to enhance the value itself. By all of, like I said, I just have to think that I have to thank also China for putting such attention on this crop because I believe there's going to be positive attention given to it even if you grow only commercial sorghum. Now there's a lot more people that are going to be aware of it everywhere I go. I mean, most of the people will ask what is it, but there's people now that'll say, yeah, I've heard about that. I heard about that on TV or on the radio. So it's giving us exposure.
So China was worth a lot to us in a lot of ways. So not just helping grain disappear, but you're right.
Right.
The exposure that we got was just tremendous and hard to put a value on that. You talk about containers. So whether it's IP or whether it's commercial sorghum, when you put those piles in a container, where are those going to go, and where do you see those best markets for container sorghum?
Well, you know, the China thing is really heart wrenching, but I feel like in the end we have what they not really. It's not even what they want. We have what they need.
Need.
We have what they need. We grow. I've seen sorghum that's grown over there. Unless it has a better end quality than here, which I don't believe. I believe we have what they need, and in the end, we are going to be back in China. It's inevitable with Baijiu and the amount that those people go through, and how sacred and ceremonial. I mean, this is the heart and soul to me of beverage over there. So I do think in the end, it's all going to come back to China. The large portion, of our maybe that's where all of our commercials going to go right back to, and that's fine with me. But over the last few years, it goes from $5 a bushel, and then it goes down to 4, and then the next year it's at. Last year I sold some sorghum for 2.93, and it made me nauseous because that's you look at the price of combines, the price of tractors, inputs, everything, fertilizer, all that stuff keeps going up. It isn't going down. So last year when I sold for $4, and this year when I sold for not even $3, and my margins and my everything's spreading out. So we're at the point where it can't go much lower. And as far as China goes, we've been in the middle of this debacle with them for 35 years. It's not going to fix itself in 1 year. You know, people have to be patient, and we have to stick together. Farmers need to remain positive that what's happening now with this China is going to be okay, and we're going to be better for it in the end. That's what I believe.
That's awesome. Got me fired up. I hope you get others fired up as well. A couple of minutes here, and we'll get you back out to the combine. Tell us what the checkoff board has got going on, and what you're looking forward to coming up there.
Well, we're going to get together in December. We're going to hopefully streamline which direction we want to go. And that's the thing too. With these targets moving, it makes it hard to strategically place your attention. I mean, do we want to focus in Spain? Do we want to focus, do we want to focus back to Mexico? Do we want to focus on new markets? So this is a real exciting time. I feel like with the 10 years that have gone past, the past 10 years, to me, it was basically getting the structure built of the checkoff, establishing it, getting it built up, and trying to get it to a maintainable level. And I feel like I'm coming on at the time where we're in the try to maintain, and we're still trying to build up, but I feel like I'm in the most exciting time that I could possibly be. I mean, who would have thought we'd be in the middle of this deal, but it's added some really big excitement. It's added some really big frustration. It's added some really big costs. But if you're going to play, you got to pay. So I feel like all the work that NSP's done, everything that everybody's done involved with this, it will be worth it.
Thanks, Shayne. That's great optimism. It certainly has been a exciting year and year of firsts in 2018, international trade case, and a ton of other things going on. Optimism's great. Sometimes it's easy to get bogged down in all of these things. We'll let you get back out to cutting that good crop. Thanks for joining us, Shayne.
Yes, thank you, John. It's been a pleasure, and go Team Sorghum.
Awesome. Go Team Sorghum. Shayne Suppes. Catch us next week on Sorghum Smart Talk. In the meantime, you can find us on Google Play Music, iTunes, Libsyn, SoundCloud, Spotify, or Stitcher. You can check us out on our YouTube channel. Visit us at our web home, sorghumcheckoff.com or sorghumgrowers.com. Follow us on Instagram or Twitter, or like us on Facebook. Don't forget to rate, review, subscribe, or send feedback through any of these platforms, or to info@sorghumcheckoff.com. Thanks for joining.